Echoes of almost. I never meant to find it. That's how these things always begin, don't they? The unexpected discoveries that crack open the past like a geode, revealing all those crystallized memories you thought were safely buried. It was just a regular Sunday afternoon. The kind where time stretches out, lazy and indulgent, and the world seems to slow down just enough that you notice things you normally rush past. I was finally tackling that cluttered spare bedroom closet. The one that had become the repository for everything without a proper home. Tax papers from 3 administrations ago. Gift bags I'd been saving for the right occasion. A bread maker still in its box from that brief period in 2020 when we all became amateur bakers. And then, underneath a pile of old winter scarves, I found a burgundy leather-bound journal I hadn't seen in 25 years. I knew what it was immediately. My handwriting on the cover had faded, but not my memory of those months in 1997 when I'd filled those pages. I sat down right there on the closet floor, dust motes dancing in the shaft of afternoon light, and opened it. May 15, 1997. I met someone today. His name is Daniel. Just like that, I was 28 again, fresh out of grad school, working at the publishing house in Boston, convinced I was going to edit the next great American novel. Instead, I was proofreading cookbooks and self-help manifestos, but I was in the game, as we said back then. In the game and utterly, completely alone in a city where I knew precisely 3 people. Daniel. Even writing his name now sends a curious ripple through me. Not exactly pain, not exactly nostalgia. Something else. Something that feels like standing at the edge of a road not taken, peering down its winding path. I met him at a book launch for one of our authors. Some businessman who'd written yet another opus on leadership. The wine was cheap, the hors d'oeuvres cheaper, but the conversation was rich because Daniel was there, with his wire-rimmed glasses and elbow patches on his tweed jacket like some kind of professor cliché, except he wore it so genuinely that it worked. "What did you think of Chapter 7? He'd asked me, as if we were old friends continuing a conversation. "I think he contradicted his entire thesis from Chapter 3, I replied, surprising myself with my candor. I was, after all, representing the publishing house. Daniel's laugh was like finding an unexpected room in a house you thought you knew the layout of. "Exactly," he said. I thought I was the only one who noticed. He wasn't an academic, it turned out, but a bookstore owner. A small independent place called Thornfield Pages in Cambridge. He invited me to visit, and I did, the very next day, telling myself it was professional curiosity. The store was everything you'd imagine. Wooden shelves stretching to the ceiling, rolling ladders, the scent of paper and binding glue and possibility. A small reading nook with worn leather chairs. A cat named Hemingway who regarded customers with literary disdain. "Welcome to my kingdom," Daniel said when I walked in, as if he'd been waiting for me. And maybe he had been. Maybe we'd both been waiting. The journal entries tracked our relationship with meticulous detail. The kind of record-keeping only a younger self with more time and fewer responsibilities could maintain. Our first official date at a tiny Italian restaurant where the chef came out to argue with Daniel about whether Kerouac was overrated. The Sunday we spent at the Museum of Fine Arts, lingering in front of the Monets until closing. The night he read Yeats to me in the back room of his bookstore after hours, lamplight catching in his dark hair. It's strange how vivid these memories become when prompted. Like they've been waiting in some antechamber of my mind, fully formed, collecting dust but losing none of their color. I can still remember how Daniel organized his bookshelves. Not alphabetically or by genre, but by what he called conversational companions. Books that spoke to each other across time and space. Austen next to Zadie Smith. Hemingway beside Baldwin. Connections I wouldn't have made, but that seemed obvious once he pointed them out. "Books are just people talking to each other through time," he told me once. "Our job is to keep the conversation going." I loved that about him, the way he saw patterns, connections, the invisible threads that bound seemingly disparate things together. It made the world seem more meaningful, less random. August rolled into September, and our relationship deepened. We talked about everything. Politics, religion, whether cereal is soup, it isn't, and I'll die on that hill. We argued about books with the kind of passionate intensity that feels like its own form of intimacy. He introduced me to authors I'd never read. I edited his terrible poetry and told him the truth about it, which he claimed to appreciate. But there was something else too. Something I could read between the lines of my journal entries. A hesitation. A holding back. October 3, 1997. Daniel showed me the house today. The one he's been saving for. It's perfect. A Victorian with a wraparound porch and built-in bookshelves in every room. He talks about it like it's a foregone conclusion. Like our futures are already intertwined. Am I ready for that? How do you know if you're ready to be the main character in someone else's story? I remember that house. I remember standing on that porch, looking out at the tree-lined street, imagining summer evenings with glasses of wine, winter mornings with coffee and snow falling. I remember wanting to want it as much as he did. But I also remember the letter that came a week later. The one offering me the position in New York. Senior editor at one of the most prestigious publishing houses in the country. The kind of opportunity that doesn't come twice. October 12, 1997. I told Daniel about the job offer tonight. I thought he would understand. Books are his life too. Instead, he looked at me like I'd slapped him. I thought we were building something here, he said. I told him we could try long distance. That people make it work all the time. He just shook his head. That's not what I meant, he said. This isn't about distance. And he was right. It wasn't about the miles between Boston and New York. It was about the different directions we were heading. He wanted roots, I wanted wings. He was building a life of meaningful connection in one place. I was chasing achievement, recognition, the next big thing. Our last conversation played out on a bench by the Charles River. It was one of those perfect New England autumn days. Crisp air, leaves performing their annual color transformation, the sky an impossible blue. I can't be the thing that holds you back, he said, his voice steady but his hands fidgeting with a fallen maple leaf, turning it over and over. And I don't think I can follow you either. Why does anyone have to follow anyone? I asked, a desperate edge to my voice that surprised us both. Why can't we just walk alongside each other for a while and see where the path leads? His smile was sad, knowing. Because that's not how you walk, Sarah. You run. You sprint. It's what I love about you, and it's why this won't work. I flew to New York the next day for meetings at my new job. When I returned to Boston to pack up my apartment 2 weeks later, I stopped by Thornfield Pages. There was a closed sign on the door, though it was the middle of the afternoon. Through the window, I could see a woman I didn't recognize shelving books. Hemingway the cat was nowhere to be seen. I never went back. Never called. Pride or fear or momentum carried me forward into my new life. The journal went into a box, the box into storage, and eventually to this house where I've lived for the past 15 years. My career flourished. I met Richard, my husband of 20 years now. We raised our daughter, Emma, who's off at college studying. What else? Literature. Life happened, as it tends to do, in its messy, beautiful, unexpected way. After finding the journal, I did what anyone would do in the digital age, I Googled him. Daniel Thornfield. Owner of Thornfield Pages, now with 3 locations across Massachusetts. Author of 2 books on the art of bookselling and 1 anthology of essays on reading in the digital age. Married to Catherine Thornfield, co-owner and events manager for the stores. There was a photo of them on the website, silver at his temples now, those same wire-rimmed glasses, his arm around a tall woman with kind eyes and a vibrant scarf. They looked happy. They looked right together. And here's the curious thing. I felt no jealousy, no regret, not really. What I felt was a strange sense of rightness. As if this was how the story was always meant to unfold. Him there, me here, both of us having built the lives we were meant to build. Would we have been happy together? Perhaps. For a while. But I would have always wondered about New York, about the path not taken. And he might have grown to resent me for changing the shape of his dreams. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes timing is everything. Sometimes the people who touch our hearts most deeply aren't meant to stay in our lives forever. I closed the journal and put it on my bookshelf. Not hidden away this time, but among the other chapters of my life. A reminder that we are shaped as much by the loves we leave behind as by the ones we hold on to. That evening, as Richard and I sat on our back deck watching the sunset, I told him about finding the journal. About Daniel. About the fork in the road 25 years ago that led me here, to this life, to him. Do you ever wonder, he asked, about how things might have been different? I thought about it for a moment, watching the sky turn from blue to pink to lavender. I don't wonder if I made the wrong choice, I said finally. But I do think about him sometimes. About how certain people come into our lives at exactly the right moment to help us become who we're supposed to be, even if they can't stay for the whole journey. Richard took my hand, his palm warm and familiar against mine. I'm glad your path led you here, he said simply. Me too, I replied, and meant it with my whole heart. Later that night, I wrote Daniel a letter I knew I would never send. Not to rekindle anything or disrupt the lives we'd built, but simply to thank him. For the conversations about books. For showing me that passion could be quiet and steady as well as wild and consuming. For being a chapter in my story that helped shape all the chapters that followed. We all carry these echoes of almost. The relationships that might have been, the paths we didn't take. They're not regrets, exactly. More like alternative drafts of our lives that help us appreciate the final version all the more. So here's to the Daniels of our lives. To the almost loves and the might-have-beens. To the hearts that touch ours briefly but permanently, like stones skipping across the surface of a lake, gone quickly, but sending ripples that reach the shore. And here's to being exactly where we're meant to be.